Okay, we're ready. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, something that's really pissing me off is I'm the only person at this podium today using reading glasses. What the fuck is up with that?
My real glasses. I couldn't see that.
There are not fonts big enough for me to read without glasses. No, I would have to hold it where you are now to read from that. Jesus. This is so unfair. Okay. All right.
But you look hot in those glasses.
Oh, you know,
You do.
I'm taking you to bed. Yeah. I'm betting you. I'm sorry, Eric. Okay, so last month I read a standalone chapter from my book, which I'm still trying to figure out if I'm going to call it a novel or a fictionalized memoir, because it's very confusing, because where's it going to go in the bookstore? But anyway, that should be my biggest problem, right? That should be a problem right there. So a problem I'm going to have to face, like saying, yeah, talking book covers, and oh, this is exciting. But anyway, so last month I read this standalone chapter, and I didn't have to tell you guys anything, and it was I almost said it was good. It wasn't bad. So this one needs like some stuff. Okay, this is like a sit-down chapter with a lot of people and a whole lot of shit going on. So, okay, this is what you need to know. Andy, our heroine, as it were, is she's a 30-something rock and roll promoter in New York City, and it's 1990. Okay. Her boyfriend, now exclusively, is Lenny. He is a pretty successful stand-up comedian. Through Lenny, she met Barry, who was her best friend in public school and junior high, and then they lost each other for like 30-something years, and then Lenny reconnected them, and he was Lenny's writing partner, until Andy started dating both of them, the whore, and fucked the whole thing up. Okay, so you need to know that. And you also, okay, Cookie is Andy's mother, and Cy is Cookie's husband. Andy's stepfather. Okay. Jerry is Andy's dad, and Roxlyn is Jerry's wife, Andy's stepmother. Samuel is Lenny's father, and Ellie is Lenny's wife. No. Ellie is Lenny's mother, and Claudine is Lenny's stepmother. Now you wonder why I'm going through my second divorce. Look at this life I come from! All right, that's all you need to know. Okay, that's all you need to know.
We need a cheat.
You need a cheat sheet. You know, but you know what? I'll help you. The way I write, you'll figure it out. You'll know where we are. Okay. 35 years old, my clock was not only ticking, the alarm was screaming 24/7 with no snooze button. After only a few months with Lenny, I began dropping hints as subtle as a brick to the head. My mission was greatly abided by the owners of Blue Room, two of the most insanely good-looking, attentive, and appreciative bosses imaginable. Hired when the club was still under construction, they included me in decisions and valued my opinions. As if that weren't enough, they loved fun and encouraged that ambiance wherever they were. Peeps, so named for his stunning blue eyes, was huge, raspy voiced, clean-cut, old-fashioned, and a retired football player. Still in amazing shape, he was a gentle giant. Billy, his partner, was a modern-day hippie, a 30-something Tom Sawyer. He had long, wavy, dirty blonde hair, a turned-up nose, and a pair of blues that weren't too shabby either. Together, they were lethal, known as much for their skin-tight jeans as they were for their eyes. Lenny couldn't help but like Billy and Peeps. Nobody could. They were nice. And as much as I adored him, he was obsessed with what he thought might be going on between me and them. My long hours spent in the downstairs office with Billy drove him crazy. Cookie and Cy adored Lenny and wanted to know what the hell we were waiting for. I wasn't getting any younger, thank you very much. I was also Cookie's only hope at grandchildren. My brother Jeff, 3 years older than me, had never married, and it was doubtful that his rotation of stripper girlfriends would ever produce him a wife, let alone a mother for his children. As much as Cookie yearned to remain young, she coveted what her friends were now enjoying, kids without the work. She pressured me, and I passed it on to Lenny as gingerly as a dancing elephant. On New Year's Eve 1990, about 5 months into our relationship, Lenny took the holiday off for the first time in years. Inviting a few couples over to help us celebrate, we sipped champagne, ate Savruga caviar, danced, and pretended to be sophisticated urban adults. At 11:45, Lenny put the TV on so we could ring in the new year with Dick Clark. That was before he got really sad. The couch was against the wall, perpendicular to the television. I was turned away from Lenny, facing the tube. He was holding me from behind, around the waist. As the ball began its descent, we all started counting along out loud. 10, 9, 8, 7. Lenny turned me around to face him. Before I could put thoughts together and figure out what was going on, he was getting down on his knee, and he was taking my hand. And at exactly 5, 4, 3, 2, he whispered softly, "Andy, will you marry me?" And at 1, I said yes. It was so fast, so discreet, that no one in the room even knew what was happening. They were all caught up in their own moment. Lenny took me into the bedroom. I love that, thank you. Lenny took me into the bedroom, presenting a too large to be a ring box. Heading my expectations and disappointment off at the past, he said, "This is just a token. I wanted you to pick out your own ring." A bit disappointed, I opened the box to see a small silver heart on a chain. With it was a tiny key. "You now hold the key to my heart." I threw my arms around his neck and kissed him fiercely. Almost without pause, I picked up the phone. Cookie and Cy were over the moon. My dad was distracted, which kind of hurt my feelings. Samuel, Len's dad, was joyful and as inquisitive as he was about most things. Ellie, Lenny's mom, never much liked me and was underwhelmed. A few days earlier, Samuel and his wife Claudine, his former student, many years his junior, had a Christmas party. Both philosophy professors, their friends, were an eclectic mix of intellectual eccentrics. It led to lively debate and loud arguments. There were no hard feelings. It was sport. Everyone was having a ball. Everyone except Ellie. She looked miserable, as she often did. Her life had been challenging, to say the least. Wearing her trouble for all to see, it weighed her down, stooping her narrow shoulders. She was a tiny thing, barely 80 pounds. In her 70s, she looked much older than her years, from a lifetime of trauma and disappointment. She was all bones and sharp edges. If that wasn't intimidating enough, she was German. Her accent thick, her voice so deep she was often mistaken for a man. Amazingly, she'd not only survived the Holocaust, she'd spent the entirety of the war as the head nurse in the Jewish hospital in Berlin, losing almost everything and everyone she loved. Adding further assault to great injury, at the end of the war, she was severely burned by an American soldier as he cleaned the floor with kerosene. Deciding to join her older sister, who had escaped to America before the worst of the war, she met Samuel, a young, handsome merchant marine, nurturing and protective. He took that tiny, broken woman and tried to make her right. Attending to her every need, he made her the most important thing in his world. It was just what the doctor ordered, for both of them. He needed to save her, and she needed to be saved. As with all rescued creatures, her gratitude bound him to him. Her gratitude for him bound her to him for life. They married soon after arriving in America. He could do no wrong, ever. Even when he fell in love with Claudine years later, Ellie remained devoted. For the first few years, she suffered her loneliness with her young son, Lenny. Once Claudine had children of her own, Ellie became their nursemaid. She attended them regularly, developing a relationship of tolerance with Claudine, who, as a Buddhist, accepted all things. Ellie learned this was her ticket to keeping Samuel in her life. She held a firm place in their new family, traveling with them, sharing holidays, and came to accept her station. Lenny had always been very available to Ellie. They often had coffee together and kept no secrets. She was tolerant of the marijuana and the women, as long as they didn't get too close. When we first began dating, Lenny called Ellie numerous times daily, always checking in from the road as well. But I began to cut in on her time. Where Lenny once confided to her everything, he no longer needed the same thing. He had me. At Samuel and Claudine's annual holiday party, where everyone was having a grand old time drinking and arguing at the table with Claudine, who was looking over at Lenny and me. Looks like there'll be a wedding in our future soon. Cue Gary.
Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to memorize it.
I set this up with Gary. This is what was going to make me come. Now I'm dry. Anyway.
Something about if he doesn't do it, it will...
He won't get married till I'm...
We won't get married till I'm dead!
Let's clap for Gary. I didn't remind him before the thing was... I just spun that. I can't do a German accent, so I didn't want to fuck it up.
Will you reshoot?
Let's do a reshoot. Let's do a reshoot. All right, do it, Gary. And Ellie said...
And now we won't be able to be married until I'm dead!
No. He won't get married till I'm dead. Try again. Take 3.
Now he won't get married until I'm dead!
But the idea was that she was thinking that he wouldn't dare get married until she was dead. Okay, thank you. Gary, Gary, keep your day job. Thank you. Okay. Okay. The room stopped. It was such a strange thing to say, especially out loud and loudly. But with me in the room, it was shocking. It was clear that Lenny and I were in love and were heading towards matrimony, clear to all except Ellie. Maybe she thought if she said it out loud, she could will it to be so. I'd overheard her, and so had half the room. Somehow, Lenny did not. And for a while, he didn't quite believe me. Ashamed that Ellie would say such a thing, I didn't hear that. Ashamed that Ellie would say such a thing, he knew her well enough to know that it was certainly possible, given her prior track record. I was not the first girl to feel her wrath. She had caused many a tear before I'd come along. I wonder if she didn't help things along with her declaration. Could Lenny's proposal have in some way been a reaction to his embarrassment? What must Ellie have thought when only days after that incident Lenny proposed? He soon got an earful. Ellie wasn't the only one raining on our parade. I was troubled by my father's lack of enthusiasm. It just didn't add up. When I announced my engagement to my non-Jewish Frank many moons earlier, my dad disowned me. It was an incredibly hurtful and seemed so out of character thing for him to do. Jerry was a Hebrew teacher and came from an Orthodox home, but still. Months later, when Frank agreed to convert, not because of Jerry's rebuff, but rather because of my stepfather's acceptance, Jerry relented, but the damage had been done. More for me than for Frank. Frank brushed it off. I was mortally wounded. Something had shifted. It proved even more confusing when he showed no joy this time. I was to marry the perfect Jewish boy. Everybody was crazy about him. Jerry was crazy about him. Why this indifference? I soon found out why. The morning after our engagement, New Year's Day, we were awakened early by the ringing telephone. Roxlyn was shaken. Roxlyn's my father's wife. Your dad's in the hospital. A gardener found him early this morning unconscious on the walk path. Can you come down? Roxlyn was being evasive. Even from 1,000 miles away, I could tell she didn't have her moony grin on. Unclear as to the cause, I sensed it was bad. Very bad. Although he was now conscious, I was clearly needed there. The thought of leaving Lenny, my brand new fiancé, to stay with Roxlyn and visit Jerry in the hospital was too depressing for words. I was not a good daughter. I was a selfish woman in love, and I did not want to go. But go I did. Tearfully leaving Lenny at the airport, unsure of what I would find when I got there or when I would return home. Roxlyn filled me in on my dad's mounting depression, slightly hinting that there might be trouble between them. They'd been married for almost 20 years, and not once had there been the single hint of discord. The shift might well explain why he'd consumed a few too many pills. Jerry was not himself, but he began rallying a bit. I stayed until he left the hospital 3 days later with the assurance that my brother would arrive immediately following my departure. Roxlyn seemed scared. That's what really shook me, though. She'd always maintained this freaky serenity. The fact that she was cracking was so unnerving, to say the least. I had to get out of there, away from her. Sleeping in the same small apartment, just the two of us, had left way too much time for us to talk, something we were never any good at. Plus, the hours upon hours spent at my dad's bedside were heartbreaking. Absent was his usual joie de vivre. It was clear the marriage was unraveling. It explained his cry for help. Sure enough, news arrived a couple of weeks later that Roxland had left him. Jerry had always been handsome and vital, never having any difficulty attracting women. Now, though in his 70s, retired with little money and less resources, when Roxland left, so did that part of him. Arriving in New York, Lenny hugged me tight, gave me a lusty kiss, and lit a joint as soon as we pulled out of the airport. Living in close proximity to Roxland, I'd white-knuckled it for 3 days. Lenny had anticipated my need. Pot was the great healer of all things, and had been for as long as I could remember. Soon after my 13th birthday, I was lounging on my brother Jeff's bed. A Day-Glo Beatles poster of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club stared down at me. As it started to get dark, I noticed the first letters of the words Lucy and the Sky with diamonds. They popped out in hot pink. LSD. What's that? Acid for tripping, Jeff said incredulously. Have you ever done it? Nah, I just smoke pot. Really? What's it like? Huh? I don't know, it's great. I want to try. I don't have any right now. Jeff's crowd was cool and hung at the local Carvel after dark. A few nights later, his friend Beau, as if anticipating my curiosity, took me in hand, inviting me back to his place to smoke. Scared out of my mind, I allowed myself to be led. Beau's parents weren't home. They had an enormous apartment with lots of rooms, one leading into another. Starting out together in what I assumed was the den, Beau produced a small wooden pipe, filling it with a greenish-brown substance that, as soon as it burned, produced an extremely pungent aroma. "It's keef," he said, handing me the bowl. "It'll get you fucked up." I knew how to inhale, having already developed a rapidly increasing cigarette habit. Drawing the smoke lightly into my lungs as I would do a lark, I coughed a little and shrugged. Beau, obviously experienced in turning on a novice, smiled knowingly, patiently instructing me on the proper technique for smoking dope. The next go-round, holding the smoke deeply before I exhaled, I coughed incessantly. Beau smiled approvingly. I've heard about people not getting high the first time. That was not my experience. As soon as I released the smoke, with it went a lifetime of fear and pain. Relaxing, I eased into an oblivion I came to worship. I remember lying on my back, lifting my right arm straight in the air. For some reason, I remained that way for what seemed like hours, not moving or speaking, simply being. I don't recall why I was allowed to be out so late, how I got home, or past Cookie, but somehow I did. I kept it a secret from Barry and Joey, but did confide in my girlfriend Joanne, who was a year older than me and very mature. It turned out she'd been pinching her brother's stash for months. We took to getting high whenever we could manage some. Marijuana freed my soul. When I was high, I was daring, outgoing, skinny, pretty, smart, and sexy. As soon as fear, insecurity, pain, or loneliness crept in, a hit or two would ameliorate the whole thing. By the time I was in high school, I was a daily smoker. In college, I was a round-the-clocker, awake and baker. Every one of my boyfriends was a stoner, too. Weed was always plentiful. There were a few brief periods of non-smoking, and I won't call them sober days, because I drank, although very modestly. Other than a brief dalliance with Boodle's martinis, I rarely drank to excess. As functional as I was stoned, was as dysfunctional as I was drunk. I hated being out of control and nauseous. Overindulging with booze usually made me feel both things. Initially, I didn't get high before classes, performances, or work, but eventually I relaxed those rules. That produced a mixed bag, about a nickel's worth. On the one hand, I was incredibly paranoid. On the other, unscrupulous and edgy. Marijuana rarely got in my way, as far as I could tell, with few exceptions. My first awareness that perhaps smoking was detrimental came with my reintroduction to Barry. He had no tolerance for drinking or smoking and was very vocal in his disdain. The first time he came to my apartment, I made the mistake of smoking in front of him. I regretted it immediately. He was crabby as shit all night. I took to toking up before I saw him. While Lenny was at sea, I was spending most of my time with Barry completely for the first time. I enjoyed being clear. A few unknowing folk even commented on how much nicer I was. I couldn't keep it up for long. When I was jonesing for a joint, it didn't take much to change my mind. With Lenny, I could be my true stoned self. What a relief. When we were planning our wedding, we were getting shit from everyone about what we should do and what we shouldn't do, especially from Ellie, Lenny's mom. It was sucking all the joy out of everything. So we went to see my therapist, Faye. Somehow, the pot came up. How much do you smoke? Not a lot anymore, maybe a hit in the morning, one in the afternoon, one at night, maybe a joiner all day, all told. You know, you're an addict, she said matter-of-factly. Bullshit! Addicts have needles hanging out of their arms. I was appalled, misunderstood. How could she say that? If only she knew how much I was really smoking. Do you believe her calling me an addict? I said to Lenny as we made our way back to the car. Pure bullshit, he said, lighting a joint. Faye planting that seed worked on me daily. I don't think I ever enjoyed pot quite the same way again. Her words echoed in my head. Guilt and shame became a part of the equation. Damn that bitch, goddamn buzzkill.